welcome to Today in Woburn. I'm excited to be catching up with the mayor about some important things that are happening in our city, but also we have another one of our candidates for City Councilor-at-large, Lori Medeiros, who will be joining me as well as we continue our election series. But first up, Scott, nice to chat with you and looking forward to catching up on the city.
Great. Thanks. You too, Samantha.
Excellent. So I've got a couple of things I just want to touch base on. I know we're going to talk a little bit about supporting the migrant families, refugee families who are in Woburn. But before we do that, I just wanted to catch up on a couple of little things. One is I know that there is an auction for one of the older firehouses that is happening towards the end. In fact, actually, it's happening on my birthday, which is probably the only reason I really remember the date. just coincidence.
Well, that's good.
I thought it would be helpful to remind people how the proceeds from that auction will be used.
Yeah, so maybe we can talk a little bit about the background and just real briefly on how we got to this position. I think one thing everybody in the city is extremely proud of is the new fire station. That's the $23 million state-of-the-art fire station that has took years for it to come together. And former Chief Adgate always lets me know he has an article from like 1970 in the Daily Times or whatnot that one of the older firemen provided to him. That's how long they've been talking about building a new central headquarters, and it took a lot of work on a lot of collaboration with my office and different departments to pull this off. And I think everybody's really proud of what we have. As part of the process, Samantha, we did proliferation studies to see how many fire stations were existing and what the best configuration would be going forward. In other words, would it be 3 stations, 4 stations, or 5 stations? And we hired a consultant who does this type of work, and they look at coverage throughout the city, existing coverage, and then they overlaid what a 3-station configuration would look like, a 4-station, to make sure you had the same coverage that you currently have, better or worse. And the two ones that we talked about were either 3 or 4, and believe it or not, we could have done a 3-station configuration or a 4, and we decided to go with a 4, which means we built a new station where we built it, and then closed down North Woburn and Central Square. Now this process was not done in a vacuum. We had numerous meetings to discuss it. Invited different parties. Always had a standing invitation to the members of the fire department, the head of the union to come down, and once in a while they came down, but the information was always out there. We met like every Monday and had different meetings, but that information was always out there, and the decision was made to go again with the 4-station configuration, and now we're at a point where it took us that amount of time to build a new station. The old stations are vacant. And what happens with vacant buildings is nothing good. And you've seen that. We've talked about it. There's a number of examples how they generally deteriorate. And so we decided we would move quickly on these 2 stations. So to that end, I sent an order down to the city council as required under state law that they give me the authority to sell them. They gave me the authority to sell North Woburn, and we're here now. We got requests for proposals to have the auctioneer. We ended up getting this auctioneer, and now we'll put it out to bid and get the highest offer for this, which is best practices, and we do have a minimum on the building. We think it'll go for more than that, but proceeds that we get will be used for the next phase of rehabilitation, which we've already started meeting to determine where we're going to start. Is it either going to be in East Woburn or West Woburn to do the next station? But those proceeds will all go to defraying the cost of what we anticipate each station is going to be between $2.5 and $3 million to rehab. So we think that's a good move. I'm really disappointed that the city council's held up the authority to sell the Central Square, the old Central Square station. There was one committee meeting, and it seems to me they're holding this up for a developer, John Tocci. And you can take a look closer at that. We'll talk more about it, but they're holding that one up, which I find to be unreasonable. I think we need to sell it. But John Tocci is a developer, and he has some plans on building a number of condos and apartments down there, which will be a burden on that area. He came to me to ask about that, and I said, no, I'm not interested. But I think a couple of city councilors are running his water on this, which to me is really disappointing. So that's where we are, and a roundabout way of saying we're going to be selling by auction North Woburn, which was by design, and very confident in our original decision to go to a 4-station configuration to cover the city of Woburn, and that bears out by the study we have. And I'd be happy to, point you in the direction to where that is as well.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that update. I appreciate it. And I didn't realize that one of them I knew only one was up for auction, but I didn't realize the reason why only one was at this point in time. So that's helpful information for all of us.
Yeah, and you might want to bring on the city councils to get their explanation as to why, but they are trying to tie the boys club into it and saying it'll benefit the boys club if they do something with the intersection. But the boys club, has been there with its regular entrance for over 40 years, and they just built a new boys club down there, borrowed funding, got numerous donations, and it was never an issue. Now they're trying to piggyback that it'll be a benefit to and I say that's a couple of the city council trying to piggyback that it'll be a benefit to the boys club, which was never an issue when they built it. What they're really doing is running the water for a developer who wants to put in over 200 apartments and condos down, off of Gustavino or whatever the number is, but it will be a burden on that area. And he's the developer is the one holding this up.
Okay, that's really good information. Thank you. We will definitely follow up and have some more discussions on that, because that's information I don't think we had. And then the last little thing I want to talk about before we get into our main topic for today is just to remind people that there is the library book sale that is on Saturday this week. I'm not sure this is going to be published before the library book sale. So I know we had Colleen on last week and we did talk about it, but for those folks who might see this beforehand, great. If not, it's always just a great reminder to go check out the library and all the awesome stuff that we have there.
Yeah,
so
great.
To bring that up, that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the announcement that the city put out there with an update about the refugee families who are in our community. As far as I can tell, if I read the information correctly, it's the same number of families. We've done, you and the schools have worked, it looks like, with DESE to get some reimbursement to cover the cost of schooling, but I just thought I would just take a moment first to give you an opportunity to talk about why you put out that announcement and kind of the current status of things from your perspective.
Well, I think it's important to let people know what's going on. And I've already capsulized this, and it's going forward, Samantha. It's definitely the process is an unsustainable burden on the Commonwealth and on cities and towns like Woburn, one of the 80 communities that are being, is where they're placing migrant families. And Woburn is one of those communities with a number of hotels. And as I said, the Commonwealth goes right past the city, doesn't need our authority. And people need to be clear on that, that it doesn't require local authority, whether it's mayoral or city council. And, with a number of hotels in the city, they go right to the hotels and pay them $180 per night per family. So, right now, I thought it was important that people know there will be an impact on the city. And we've got about 150, 160 migrant families that are in, we've got a shelter and then another 4 hotels that are participating with the Commonwealth. And that has translated into about 60 school-age children, which I put, we can get into details, but it's 60 school-age children. And as you said, it's not a deal that we've negotiated with DESE and the Commonwealth. The $104 per student is something that they came up with to address these needs. And as we look at that, one of the concerns is that going to be going forward as long as this continues, or is it going to be for a year? But right now, the $104 per student translates to about $18,000 a year. Plus, DESE gives another $1,000 per student to address upfront costs that might be needed, like tablets or other school needs. So, we're looking at those, the reimbursement, which will come on a quarterly basis in arrears, Samantha. So we'll get the money we'll be putting the money up, but then we'll get the payments from the Commonwealth every quarter in arrears. So we'll be monitoring those expenses. School's done a great job. Matt Crowley, his staff, and the teachers stepping up to, get students registered, enrolled, and accommodated into the school in the new setting. So they've done a great job, I have to say that. And we'll be looking at the costs. We meet with Matt and the finance director on a monthly basis to see what they're seeing for new expenses. But the reason to update people is really to let them know this is going on. It's going on for a couple of reasons, Samantha, which I've been clear about. It's, we've got the right to shelter law. We're one of three, and I say that because they both have varying degrees of the law, but Massachusetts is the only state with the right to shelter law, as unique as it is, but New York City has one, and Washington, D.C. has one as well. And the right to shelter law was, as I say, was very well intentioned when it was passed back in the 80s to find housing for homeless families and pregnant women who didn't have housing. So in those situations, the state is required to find them housing. And now you fast forward to 2020 and the influx of migrants. It was never designed to address that type of homelessness and that type of this situation we're in. So that's one thing. And then secondly, at the federal level, they really need to get it together with immigration reform, meaningful immigration reform, to address the issues at the border. So I say those two things I want to let people know, and also to let them know that this is going to continue. It's not only an unsustainable cost at the state level, but we'll be looking at the city level, particularly when we are, when you look around at our neighbors, Samantha, right? You look around at Winchester, Lexington, Wilmington, Reading, Stoneham. They're not seeing any students. They're not sharing in the in what the governor calls it herself is a crisis, and the burden is great on cities like Woburn, and will continue to grow. If more migrants and keep coming over into Massachusetts, and as the governor said, we're seeing about 1,000 a month, which is really an incredible amount of new people coming into the state and being put in different communities. Required the biggest challenge is educating and finding space in your schools and finding teachers who have the EL experience to help in the education process.
Thank you for the update. I think it's important we all understand what's happening. One thing I wanted to ask you about, because it was written about in the paper-ish, at least online. I don't have a physical paper anymore, but we haven't spoken about it. There were some pretty negative. It was written in the paper as Nazi protests that went to some of the hotels. Yeah. Our police did an excellent job of dispersing that very quickly. Yeah. And as far as I know, has not come back. But I would, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about, clearly, as we talk about things at a state and a federal level, and even at a local level, these families are here. They are here legally. There's lots of discussion around immigration reform that needs to happen, but we certainly don't want kids or families.
Look, that type of behavior, Samantha, that type of behavior is that intolerance is not acceptable. It's really it's disgraceful, and I think everybody knows that. I don't want to say unfortunately happened, but that's not a Woburn group. We all know that. That's a group that that goes from community to community, and their activity is disgraceful. It's just not acceptable.
Yeah, good. Well, thank you. I do think it's important that we just sort of say that. And again, I want to thank the police for taking swift action. I know they were able to disperse that quickly, which was just good for everyone. So excellent. Anything else that you want to touch base on before I let you go?
No, I mean, I'm gonna I'm sure Lori's waiting in the wings and she wants to get her time with you. But we did talk about PFAS, and we're moving forward with PFAS. We've been in compliance with the Mass DEP regulations for the maximum contaminant level of PFAS, which is 20, it's the 20 parts per trillion, which we've been in compliance with for the 4 consecutive quarters. We're taking this action very seriously, and we've got our approval from SRF for funding, which we've talked about a number of times. I do think, one of your shows coming up, you generally are very gracious to have Carol Regal come on. Every 4 or 5 months we come on and give a detailed update. So maybe in the next 2 or 3 weeks, that might be something you can schedule.
Yeah, I think we might need to do it post-election just because we're booked up. I want to make sure that every candidate has had an opportunity to come on the show and speak. I'm super grateful. All but one who's running unopposed has not accepted our invitation, but everybody else has. And so, but I would be happy to have her on in November and give us an update of where we are with the infrastructure project.
In the meantime, I would just encourage residents to check the city's website if they have any concerns about PFAS, if they want updates. But we update that regularly and with results. But and again, if people have any questions about what actions we're taking, they can feel free to call my office, and I'd be happy to talk to them about what we're doing and how we're addressing this issue.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us an update. Welcome, Lori.
Hi, Samantha. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm really glad to have you on. Thank you for joining us. I think it's I'm so grateful for all the candidates who are coming on board and letting us get to know you a little bit better. And one of the things that I wanted to, just sort of start our discussion with, because look, these are time-consuming positions, and it takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort to be a city councilor at large. Tell us a little bit about why you've decided to put your hat in the ring.
Well, it's been on my radar for probably a good 10 years now. Many people know my husband, Paul Medeiros, was the Ward 5 alderman back in the 1990s and the early 2000s. And I lived it for 14 years. And I not only lived it, but I loved it. And, we don't have children, so it kind of became our lives. And, I've been active in volunteering and in the community for the majority of my adult life. So, when you make the decision every 2 years, I always at the beginning of the season would say to myself, is this the year? Should I do it? So I think, there's 2 things that go on. You first of all, you check with your spouse and because as you say, there's a lot of time involved. And, Paul and I have a great relationship with it. We're probably each other's biggest cheerleaders. And, so I have his full support. And secondly, you make a concerted effort to disentangle yourself from any possible either perceived or actual conflicts of interest that may arise out of you jumping into the ring for this. So those are 2 important things. And the full disclosure here, my husband, Paul, is a City of Woburn employee. He works for the Department of Public Works. Very proud of that, as he is proud to be an employee. So as far as that plays into it, like many other city councilors and school committee members, you abstain from voting on the line item of the budget that pertains to, if you have a relative. Second, some people run because they have an axe to grind, or, an issue has gotten them excited and worked up. That's not the case here. It's just something that I feel my experience and knowledge over the years can bring a lot to the city, and I want to share that with everybody. I don't view the 3 gentlemen that are in this race with me as opponents. There's an open seat, and I view them as fellow candidates, and I'm running for myself.
Hey, excellent. Well, we're so pleased. We are very fortunate to have many people in our community who want to serve. And we're, that's something we should all be grateful for, that we don't always see that. I know it feels like way back in the 90s. It feels so far away, but you were a chairperson of the Disability Commission at the time. And if I remember correctly, it was, the first time we had that commission, but correct me if I'm wrong. I wanted to give you a chance to make sure I'm correct with that information, but also talk a little bit about some of the things you were accomplished at that time.
You are correct. It was, I believe, 1991 when the ADA came into compliance. And it was a very trying time for many municipalities because like many things that happen both on the state and federal level, these mandates were being instituted and they don't always follow through with the resources to support them or the funding. So we found ourselves as a city, City Hall was not accessible. There were not accessible restrooms. There was not an elevator. People couldn't maneuver around the building. And of course, funding is always a huge issue. So a couple of the things that I'm really proud of, we had our first chairperson, her name was Lisa DeLuna, and she was an attorney, lived in Woburn. I don't believe she's here anymore, but she was awesome. And one of the things that we were able to do was to work with city officials to pass legislation that allowed fines from handicap parking to become under the control of the commission. And I believe that is still the case today. And I think the fines might have been $50 back then. And I think they're somewhere up around $300 now. So with that money, some of the things that we did, we purchased automatic door openers for some of, as you know, City Hall's an older building and those big heavy doors, and we helped out with the schools as well. But the administration at the time did put an elevator in City Hall, and so a lot of good came out of it. Another thing, while I was on the commission and my husband was on the city council, a mother came to us and wanted to get involved in trying to create our first handicap accessible playground, which is Kids Kingdom at Leland Park. So that was another great experience, working with a bunch of residents and very grassroots. And there were some public-private partnerships, but the playground was built at no expense to the city at that time. So very proud of those things. And I'm very happy to see that the commission is functioning still today.
It's such important work that happens. Thank you for the service you gave us at that time to help get that started. I did not move to Woburn until a couple years later than that, early, I guess 95-ish, I think is when I moved here, 94, 95. So it was almost there at that time, but I came when some of that existed, and I didn't have kids for a few more years after that. So I didn't notice playgrounds and things probably until a little bit later, but grateful that all of those things exist today. I did want to talk a little bit about, so you're in your professional capacity, you are a realtor, and you have some expertise in property development. A big portion of the work that city council does is approving permits and things. And so wanted to just talk a little bit about how, do you perceive any conflict? And if there is any, how will you manage that?
Okay. First of all, I've been out of that profession for 7 years now, and I have no intentions of going back. It was a grueling 24/7 job for many years that I did. But I think as a result of that, it has empowered me with the knowledge and the experience to have sat on both sides of this. And I sat on both sides of it simultaneously because there was development going on in Woburn and I was a Woburn resident. I totally respect a property owner. Every property owner has the right to develop their property for a profit. That's what makes the world go round. And that's our commerce, and that's what helps with our tax rate and all of the great services that we have here. However, I think we need to strike a balance. And I think my knowledge and experience can bring to the table that I understand reading plans. I would understand how to condition a permit so that we can hopefully strike that kind of a balance so the residents can coexist with any new development that comes in. And as far as a realtor, I have had my real estate sales license for in excess of 25 years, but I have never signed on with a real estate company or agent. I have never sold a house. I don't have any intentions to. And even if I did, I would stop that if elected to the city council. But the reason that I have that license is at the time I was I was doing specialty leasing at shopping centers, and it was a requirement of my employer. So I felt, I put the time into this, why not keep it up? And that's why I've done it. But I do want to say, the quality of life for our residents of Woburn, who are the reason that I am running, and the most important reason, I think, if you're an elected official, the quality of life for them should never suffer, regardless of how much we grow and evolve. And that is the cornerstone of my campaign.
That's great. Thank you. Now, you currently serve on the Woburn Board of Assessors. Is that correct?
Yes, I do.
I have to be honest, I don't know much about work. I mean, I know what assessors do in general, but I don't know much about the board and its function. Can you talk a little bit about what that is and if it is something that you would be able to continue doing on city council or something that you would have to excuse yourself from?
Certainly. Well, first, I would resign from the board because it's, I believe it's illegal and not ethical to receive 2 paychecks from the city of Woburn. And this is the first position in the city that I actually got a stipend from. I've always done volunteer work. So absolutely, I would be resigning from that. But what the Board of Assessors does, there are many exemptions that are available to our residents, to senior citizens, to veterans, to people that have a sight impairment, and they apply for these every year. And one of the things that the board does is to review all of these exemptions and sign off on them and make sure that the people meet the criteria and the requirements. And there's a great staff in the assessor's office. John Conley does a fabulous job, the support staff and the other appraisers. So we work with them, and then every year the population, the taxpayers in the city, have the right to appeal their real estate tax bill. And if they do, they file a form, and that comes before us also with the expertise and the input of the people that are doing the appraisers. And they will give us recommendations as to deny or approve. And that's pretty much what our meetings entail.
Great, thank you. See, I learned something brand new today. I had no idea that that function existed and what it did. So that's one of my favorite parts about doing these interviews is I'm always learning something new about our city that I wouldn't have known otherwise. So that's great. I want to talk a little bit about you were generous enough, as many candidates have been, in filling out the Woburn Welcome Survey and answering lots of questions. We'll not ask you to repeat the things there, but there was one we wanted to follow up and ask you about. And there was a question in there, I'm paraphrasing, so for the audiences, this is not the exact question, but it basically was saying, hey, we've had some tense negotiations with multiple unions across the city. What role and should you be elected in city council might you play in helping to dissipate those tensions? And you answered that question, and I will give you the opportunity to answer, but just to sort of paraphrase, you said really city council doesn't play a role in negotiation, and so there isn't much that I would do. And I agree. The city council does not negotiate those contracts, but the city council does approve budgets. And I was a little surprised by that answer. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that and your point of view and why you think it's important to completely distance yourself, or perhaps I misinterpreted that response as well.
Certainly. Yeah, I think maybe it's being taken a little bit out of context, because by no means, and I want to emphasize this, did I ever mean that the city council does not have a role in supporting the citizens, because I think I've already said that in this interview, that, that's the cornerstone of my campaign. But yes, I did say that, we have to distance ourselves from the negotiations and collective bargaining. And as you saw with the teachers' strike earlier this year, our city council president and city council basically stayed very silent on this. And I know there was a lot of frustration amongst the community in that they felt they were emailing and calling these people, elected officials, school committee members also, and that they weren't getting any answers. And, I don't know how familiar you are with, state ethics and conflict of interest and all of that, but it's a very slippery slope, and you really do have to be careful. So my intention is, if this is a tense issue, that people feel this is a tense issue, I absolutely, and I think this starts way before contracts are even up for negotiation, you find out from people how they feel, and it's incumbent upon us as city councilors to collaborate and keep the communication open with the mayor, the school administration, the department heads, the union heads. And I would absolutely go to bat and do that for anybody that had a concern. Absolutely. And, I will say I've been knocking on doors for a couple of months and talked to hundreds of people at this point. And not trying to belittle this by any means, but one of my first questions after I say that I'm not Verizon or Solar, so they will open the door to me. The first questions I ask them, I identify myself and say, you know, what is on your mind and what is a concern to you as a resident? And this has not come up. And that's not to say that it doesn't exist, because obviously for Woburn Welcomes to ask that, it exists. But what I've been finding, people have more of a gripe about it taking a half an hour for them to get from downtown to the post office in East Woburn. So, but I am there, if fortunate enough to be elected, I am there 100% to support residents, not only in this issue, but in any issue. And I feel nothing is too minimal, and you're not always going to agree, and the outcome may not always work in the favor of that person's concern. But I think if you care enough to listen to the people and really hear what they're saying and bring that to the proper people and let it be discussed and hashed around, at the end of the day, even if they're not happy, there should be a respect. And I think that's where the reward comes in, that you know you're doing the best that you can when you're also looking at the big picture of the whole city.
I think you're absolutely right that people need to be heard even when disagreements happen. And so that role, I think, is such an important and critical one. And thank you for taking a chance to sort of talk through that question in a little bit more detail. I appreciate it. And I sympathize on the getting through the city and certain times of day. My husband works for a company that has him drive. He drives quite a lot to do his job. And sometimes he says it's harder to get it through Woburn than for me to drive from Woburn to, another
It's crazy.
cities away. And once he gets on the highway, he's okay. So, all of that is very real. That is a challenge for us as a city. I mean, and look, the benefit of being at the crossroads of two major highways that make it us close to many, many things also makes us very vulnerable to some of this traffic buildup sometimes as well. And we could spend a whole show on traffic, but I won't do that to our our audience or to you. But let me ask you a couple more questions before I let you go. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, City Councilor-at-large has a particularly challenging role in that you represent multiple wards and represent the city overall. What are some of the ways that residents can get to know you if you have events coming up or neighborhoods you're going to or a website you want to direct them to, just to let people know how to get a hold of you?
Sure. Well, as I said, I continue to walk the neighborhoods. I will be having some neighborhood gatherings with friends and family that I'll be announcing. I do have a Facebook page, and it's a mouthful, but I'll give you that before I finish.
Jen will get it up on the screen, so don't worry. She'll make sure it's on the
Okay.
screen for you.
And all of my literature and my Facebook page has my phone number and my email address, and I'm already fielding calls from people, and it's just great to hear from people, and putting myself out there as much as I can as far as a party or a fundraiser or anything like that. There's no plans to do that. I'm not saying it won't happen, but right now there's no immediate plans. Pretty much a grassroots campaign. My motto has been one woman, one sign, and you can find me around the city on any given day, just me and my one sign out there. And I think it's important for people to see the candidate and to see me. And not saying it isn't great to have a group of people. And as we get closer to election, I will be doing that. But right now, I'm in it. Friends want to walk with me and drop literature, but I want the opportunity, if somebody is home and I ring the bell, that they can talk one-on-one.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for doing that. Anything else you'd like voters to know as we wrap up here today?
I just want them to know that I have a fierce passion and an energy for this job. I feel that my experience and my background allows me the ability to hit the ground running on day one if I am fortunate enough to get there. I am well versed in Robert's rules and parliamentary procedure, which I think is a big bonus once you get into meetings. I want people to reach out to me should they have any questions or concerns. I look forward to meeting people as I continue on this path, and I will do the best that I can for everybody. Like I said, nothing is too small to be if it's somebody's concern, it's a legitimate concern. And I will take the time and put the energy in. And I hope that people will consider me for one of their 2 votes on November 7th.
Thank you so much for joining us, Lori, and all of you who are in the audience. As always, please continue to take good care of each other.